Lyra walked slowly through the crowded market, her steps soft against the metal floor. The air was filled with shouts, the hiss of steam vents, and the smell of burning oil. But none of these sounds touched her heart. Once, long ago, she had been a musician, not just any musician, but one whose music could make even the coldest heart feel warm. She played the crystal harp, an instrument made from the rare stones of her homeworld. Its strings shimmered like starlight. Its notes were pure and bright. That was before the war came. The sky over her city had turned red. Ships had rained fire. Buildings had fallen like sand. When she escaped the burning streets, she carried only her harp, but it was struck in the chaos, the crystal shattered. The sound gone forever. She had hidden for days, clutching the broken pieces, until she realized she could never repair it. Since then, silence had been her only companion. She worked now at a small stall in the market, selling scraps of metal to traders who never looked her in the eye. Every sound around her felt sharp and empty. Alien voices, heavy footsteps, the clink of coins, none of it could replace the music she had lost. Her species had always believed that music was life itself. Without it, the spirit grew cold. She could feel that coldness in herself now. Creeping deeper each day, she avoided places where music still played. She avoided looking at instruments in shop windows, because each one was a reminder of what she no longer had. Then, one afternoon, as the artificial sun lamps dimmed for evening, she heard a sound that made her stop. It was not like the music of her people. It was deeper, richer, as if it came from the earth itself. It was coming from somewhere in the crowd. She turned her head slowly, scanning the faces. There, between two stalls selling alien fabrics, stood a human, tall, broad-shouldered. Atia's clothes travel-worn. Slung across his back was a large, locked box. But it was the small device in his hand that made the sound. It sang with a low, warm tone that seemed to reach straight into her chest. Lyra's heart pounded. She stepped closer without meaning to. The human looked up, and their eyes met. His gaze was steady, curious. He did not smile. But there was no coldness in him either. She noticed the box on his back was made of dark wood, reinforced with metal corners. It looked old, well-traveled, and carefully protected. The sound from his device faded. Leaving the market noise to rush back around her, she felt as if something precious had been taken from her again. "Do you like music?" the human asked, his voice low but clear. Lyra hesitated, her throat tight. "I used to," she said at last. He tilted his head, studying her, then glanced at the box on his back. "I carry music with me," he said, "but only for the right hands." Her eyes went to the box, a strange hope rising in her chest. But she pushed it down quickly. She had learned long ago that hope could hurt more than loss. "What's in it?" she asked carefully. "That," he said, "is not something I open in a place like this." Something in his tone made her curious but also wary. He was a stranger, and humans were rare here. Many aliens did not trust them, and some saw them as dangerous, yet there was no threat in his voice, only something like respect. He glanced at the crowd and then back at her. "If you want to see, meet me tonight," he said. "There's an old music hall, east side of the market. No one goes there anymore." Lyra frowned. The idea of going somewhere alone with a stranger was foolish, but still, that strange sound was in her mind, echoing over and over. The memory of it was making her chest ache. He started to walk away, disappearing into the shifting crowd. But just before he was gone, he looked back at her. "My name's Daniel," he said. "If you come, I'll show you something you've never seen before." Lyra stood frozen for a moment, the market noise buzzing around her. She told herself not to go. She told herself this was nothing but trouble, yet deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, the faint, fragile pull of music calling her name. That night, she sat in her small, dim room, staring at the wall. The sound she had heard earlier seemed to float in the air. Like a ghost, she could almost feel the vibration against her skin. She remembered her crystal harp, how the strings felt beneath her fingers, how the air shimmered when she played. She had believed that part of her life was gone forever, yet here was a human with a locked box. Speaking as if he held something for her, the streets outside grew quieter as the night cycle deepened. Shadows stretched across her floor. She stood slowly, her hands trembling. She told herself she was only curious, that she would look and leave, nothing more, but in her heart. She knew the truth. She was going because a single note had broken through her silence. And she needed to hear it again. The streets on the east side of the market were quiet. The air cooler, the lamps flickering as if they had not been serviced. In years, Lyra walked carefully, her steps soft, her ears listening for danger. She kept telling herself she should turn back, but the thought of the sound she had heard kept pulling her forward. The old music hall stood at the end of a narrow street, its wide doors half open, the wood cracked, the paint peeling. A faint smell of dust and rust hung in the air. She stepped inside slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Rows of broken chairs stretched out before her, some overturned, some missing legs. The stage was cracked. Pieces of old instruments lay scattered in the corners, in the silence. She could almost hear the ghost of music that once filled this place. Then she saw him, the human, Daniel, standing near the center of the stage. The locked wooden box placed carefully on a table beside him. He looked up when she entered, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "You came." She nodded, walking closer. "I want to know what's in the box," she said. Daniel smiled faintly, not in a mocking way, but as if he already knew she would come. "Before I show you," he said, "tell me something. You were a musician once, weren't you?" Her heart skipped. She looked away. "Not anymore," she said, her voice low. "I can hear it in the way you listen," he said. "The way you stopped in the market earlier, you recognized something in the sound. Something you thought was gone." Lyra stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the box. It was about the length of her arm, made of dark wood, reinforced with metal corners. She could see that it had been scratched and dented from years of travel, yet it was still solid. Daniel rested his hand on the lid. "What's inside is not just an object," he said. "It's a piece of something." "Lost," she frowned slightly. "Lost to who?" "To you," he said quietly, "and to your people." Her fingers curled slightly, her pulse quickened. She had not told him anything about her past. Yet he spoke as if he already knew her story. "How would you know that?" She asked. "Because I was there," he said simply. "Not in your city, not when it burned, but in the ruins afterwards." The air felt heavier. Lyra took a slow breath. "And you found something?" Daniel nodded once. "I found a sound." She blinked, not understanding a sound. "Yes," he said. "My people have ways of capturing sound, locking it inside devices so it can be played again later, like trapping a moment in time." Lyra's eyes widened slightly. Her people had never done such a thing. Once a song was played, it was gone forever, unless remembered and played again by hand. "What sound did you find?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper, instead of answering. Daniel reached for the box and began unlocking it. The sound of the metal latches clicking echoed in the empty hall. Her heart beat faster with each click. He lifted the lid slowly, revealing a smaller device inside. It was sleek, silver, and covered in fine scratches, as if it had been handled many times. "This," he said, resting his fingers gently on it, "is how humans carry voices, music, even the wind, from one place to another." Her breath caught. "And you have my music." Daniel's eyes met hers. "Yes," he said. "I believe it belongs to you." She felt her legs go weak. She stepped forward without thinking, her hands trembling slightly. He pressed a button on the device, and at once, the hall was filled with sound. Her sound, the melody was soft at first. Like the brush of starlight on still water, it swelled slowly, rising into the warm. Bright notes she remembered as if she had played them only yesterday. She felt her chest tighten, her vision blur with tears. She closed her eyes, letting the notes wrap around her, each one carrying memories, the way her fingers danced over the crystal strings, the way the air shimmered, the way her people's voices joined in quiet harmony. When the music faded, she opened her eyes slowly. How? How is this possible? She asked. I told you, Daniel said. We can keep sound alive. Lyra's hands hovered over the device, afraid to touch it. You kept it all these years. I found it 2 years ago, he said, buried under stone, almost destroyed. I've repaired it, but it needs a special kind of energy to keep running. Her eyes flicked to him. Energy? He nodded. Rare cells, not sold openly here. She looked at the box again, her voice barely more than a breath. You brought this to me. Why? Daniel's expression softened. Because it's yours, and because I think you're not done making music. She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. I haven't played in years. Then it's time you started again, he said simply. She didn't answer, but she knew, deep inside, that this man, this human, had just broken the silence she thought would last forever. And that whatever came next, she could not let the music die again. The old music hall was still and quiet, dust hanging in the air like faint mist. Daniel's small device sat on the table between them, its silver surface catching the weak light from a cracked ceiling lamp. Lyra could not take her eyes off it. Her chest still warm from the melody it had played, she reached out slowly, her fingers hovering over the buttons, afraid that if she touched it wrong, the sound would vanish forever. Daniel noticed her hesitation. Go on, he said gently. It won't break so easily. Her fingertips brushed the cool metal and she felt a strange pull, as if the device itself remembered her touch. She pressed the button Daniel had used before, and the hall filled once more with the music she thought she had lost. Her breath caught. Every note was alive, shimmering in the air, carrying her back to a time when her world was whole. She could see herself again, seated on the stage of her people's grand hall, the crystal harp before her, her friends and family gathered close, their faces glowing in the soft blue light of the crystal lamps. It was the night of the Festival of Stars, the most important celebration of her people. The sound of her harp had mingled with the hum of the crowd, the gentle sway of the banners, and the laughter of children. She remembered the pride in her teacher's eyes, the way the hall had fallen silent when she began to play. The notes rose and fell, now exactly as they had that night. And for a moment, she forgot the ruins, the war, the years of silence. For a moment, she was there again. A tear slipped down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. She let the music carry her. When the final note faded, she stood still, her hands resting on the table, her eyes closed. Daniel did not speak. He only waited. Finally, she opened her eyes, her voice soft but steady. That was the last time I ever played. Daniel studied her. You were playing for a crowd. She nodded, her gaze distant. For my whole city. They sang with me. The walls seemed to glow. She swallowed hard, and the next morning, the sky turned red. Silence settled between them again, heavy but not empty. It was the silence of someone remembering something too important to rush. Daniel leaned forward. Do you want to hear more? Lyra blinked. There's more. He gave a small nod. I found not just one song, but several. Some damaged, some clear. They were all in the same place. Her heart ached in the ruins. She said quietly, Yes, he said. And they've been waiting for someone who knows what they mean, she swallowed. Why didn't you give this to my people? Daniel hesitated. I tried. But most didn't want it. They said music was for the living, not for memories. They didn't want to open old wounds. Lyra's chest tightened. She could almost hear the voices of the elders. Cold and practical, telling her the same thing. Years ago, she had been too broken to fight them then. But now, hearing her own notes again, she felt something inside her spark. Play another, she said, her voice firmer. Daniel pressed another button. And this time, the melody was lighter, playful, almost like a dance. Lyra's lips parted in a small smile without her realizing. Her feet shifted as if they remembered. The steps, she closed her eyes, and she could see the faces of her younger cousins. Spinning in circles, laughing, chasing each other between the rows of chairs. When it ended, she opened her eyes slowly. This is more than just music, she said. Daniel nodded. It's a piece of you, of your people. That's why I came looking for you. Her gaze moved back to the device, her fingers curling slightly. I could keep it. She asked carefully. You can, Daniel said. But there's something you need to know. The energy cells it uses are almost gone. Without new ones, it will go silent again. Lyra's heart sank, and they're rare. Very, he said, and illegal in some systems. She felt torn. The thought of losing the sound again made her chest tighten painfully. Then I have to find them, she said, without hesitation. Daniel smiled faintly. I thought you'd say that. She looked up at him. Will you help me? His answer came without pause. Yes. The word was simple, but it settled something inside her. For the first time in years, she was not facing the silence alone. Lyra picked up the device, carefully cradling it in both hands as if it were fragile glass. If we find the cells, I can play again, she whispered, almost as if she was afraid to say it too loud. You can, Daniel said, and maybe. Your music can do more than you think. She tilted her head. What do you mean? He shrugged lightly. Music has a way of changing people, more than words, more than rules. She didn't know if she believed that yet, but she wanted to. She wanted to believe that a single melody could mean something in a galaxy that seemed so loud with war and greed. That night, as they left the hall together, the device safe in her arms, she felt the faint vibration of the music still in her chest. It was not the same as having her harp, but it was a beginning, and beginnings were rare. She did not look back. At the old hall, she kept her eyes forward, following Daniel into the dark streets. Her steps lighter than when she had come. In her mind, the song played again and again. And for the first time in many years, she did not fear the morning. The next morning, the market was already awake when Lyra stepped out into the narrow street. The sound of voices, clattering tools, and rattling carts filled the air. But now she carried something in her arms that made all those noises seem far away. The small silver device was wrapped in cloth, hidden from curious eyes. Its weight felt strange, not heavy, but important. Daniel walked beside her, scanning the crowd, his voice low. We can't stay here too long, he said. Word travels fast in places like this. Lyra kept her gaze forward because of the device. He nodded. There are people who would sell it, people who would destroy it. Even people who would keep it locked away just so no one else could have it. She tightened her grip on the cloth. Then we'll keep it safe. Daniel gave a small smile. That's the plan. They reached a quiet corner where the noise of the market faded. Daniel crouched beside a small crate and opened a folded map. The paper was worn, edges curled. The energy cells we need are made in the borderlands, he said, but they're not sold legally here. The only way to get them is through the outlaw markets. Lyra frowned. Outlaw markets. Dangerous. Very, Daniel said. You'll find thieves, bounty hunters, smugglers, and worse. But that's where the cells will be. Lyra hesitated. The idea of going into such places made her chest tighten. She had spent years avoiding. Danger, staying in the safest corners she could find. But then she looked down at the device in her hands, remembering the sound of her own music filling the empty hall. The way it had made her feel alive again. "I'll go," she said firmly. "Daniel." Raised an eyebrow, no hesitation. She shook her head. "If this is the only way to bring the music back." "Then I'll go." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but we do this carefully." Before they could move, a shadow fell over them. Lyra turned sharply to see a tall alien with mottled green skin and sharp yellow eyes watching them. He had the stance of someone who was listening too closely. Daniel's tone stayed calm. "Can we help you?" The alien's gaze flicked to the cloth bundle in Lyra's arms. His mouth twisted into a smirk. "Nice box you've got there." Lyra felt her muscles tense. Daniel stepped in front of her slightly. "Not for sale." The alien tilted his head. "Everything's for sale, human," he said slowly. "Especially something that makes you guard it like that." Before Daniel could answer, Lyra's voice came out sharper than she expected. "It's mine." The alien's eyes narrowed. He stared at her for a long moment before chuckling and stepping back. "Keep it close, little songbird," he said, then vanished into the crowd. Daniel exhaled slowly. "That's exactly what I meant about word traveling fast." They decided to leave the city that afternoon, moving through side streets to avoid attention. Lyra kept the device close to her body, hidden under her cloak, her ears alert for footsteps behind them. By evening, they reached the transport docks. A line of old cargo skiffs waited under the shadow of the wall. Daniel found a pilot willing to take them to the borderlands in exchange for credits and a favor owed. The skiff's engines rumbled to life, lifting them into the dusty twilight sky from above. Lyra could see the city shrinking below them, the lights glowing faintly through the smog. She felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief to be leaving before anyone else came looking for them. Fear because she had no idea what lay ahead. The journey was rough, the skiff shaking as it crossed into wilder territory. The land below turned from crowded settlements to open stretches of wasteland. The sun burned red over the horizon, and strange, twisted shapes of old war machines lay half buried in the dirt. Daniel pointed to them. "The borderlands have been fought over 4 decades," he said. "Most people here survive by taking what's left from the old battles." Lyra watched the rusted machines pass beneath them, thinking of her own city's ruins. Wondering how many other voices had been lost in places like this, they landed just outside a settlement that looked more like a scrapyard than a town. The air smelled of oil and smoke. Small fires burned in metal drums along the narrow streets. Daniel adjusted the strap on his shoulder, keeping his hand near the small weapon at his belt. "Stay close," he told her. Lyra stayed just a step behind him as they entered the outlaw market. The noise here was different from the cities. Louder, rougher, with laughter that carried no warmth. Stalls were piled high with weapons, illegal tech, and stolen goods, the sellers shouting over each other. Daniel led her to a narrow alley where a small shop was hidden between 2 larger stalls. Inside, the air was cooler. Dim lights flickered overhead. Behind the counter stood a short alien with dark, scaled skin, his eyes sharp. Daniel stepped forward. "We're looking for energy cells. Type 7. The alien's eyes flicked to Lyra, then to the bundle in her arms. His lips curled in a slow smile. "Type 7. Rare, expensive." Lyra swallowed. "We can pay." The alien's smile widened. "Not with credits," he said. "Credits are nothing here. I trade for things of value." His gaze lingered on the cloth bundle. Lyra's grip tightened. "Not this," the alien shrugged. "Then you'd better have something else worth my time." Daniel's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Lyra's voice cut through, steady and clear. "What if I give you something no one else here can? A song?" The alien blinked. "A song?" "Yes," she said, lifting her chin. "One you'll never hear anywhere else." The alien leaned back, intrigued. "Sing for me then, little songbird. Let's see if your music is worth the price." Lyra glanced at Daniel, and for the first time in years, she felt that fire inside her burn again. Maybe music could still be more than just a memory. Maybe it could be a weapon. The alien seller leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, his eyes watching Lyra as if trying to read her soul. The small outlaw shop was silent now. The noise of the market outside, muffled by the thick metal walls. Daniel stood close beside her, ready to step in if things went wrong. But this was her moment. Lyra took a deep breath. She did not have her crystal harp. She did not even have proper strings or keys. But she had her voice, and she had the small, silver device. She set it gently on the counter, unwrapped it, and pressed a button. The hall filled with the sound of soft notes, the recording of her crystal harp from long ago. The melody rose like sunlight, spilling through clouds. Lyra began to sing with it, her voice low at first, warm and steady. The alien's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing as if the sound reached somewhere he had not expected. She let her voice climb higher, weaving through the notes like a bird through wind. The sound was not just music, it was memory. It was the echo of a world that no longer existed. Daniel glanced at the seller and saw his posture shift, the scales on his neck fluttering faintly, when the last note faded. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. The alien finally exhaled. "You weren't lying, songbird," he said. That was worth something. He bent down, reached under the counter, and placed a small metal case on the table, opening it to reveal 3 Type 7 energy cells. "These will keep your little box alive for a long time." Lyra's chest filled with relief. "Thank you," she said softly. The alien leaned closer, its voice low. "But be careful. Word of that voice will spread. Not everyone will want to pay for it. Some will try to take it." Daniel placed the cells in his pack quickly, nodding once in thanks before guiding Lyra toward the door. Outside, the market noise rushed back in. Rough laughter, clinking weapons, the hiss of old engines. They did not stay long. Daniel led her out of the outlaw market and back toward the skiff dock. The sun was lower now, turning the metal rooftops red. "We need to move fast," he said. "We've already attracted enough attention." They boarded the small skiff they had hired earlier, the pilot starting the engines with a grumble. The craft lifted from the ground, leaving the market shrinking behind them. Lyra held the silver device close, her fingers tracing its edges as the skiff cut through the dusty air. The land below stretched wide and empty, old battlefields marked by rusted machines and blackened craters in the distance. The skeleton of a great warship lay half buried in sand, its metal hull torn open like paper. "Your world fought here too?" Daniel asked quietly. Lyra nodded. "Not this place. But battles like this happened everywhere." They fell into silence, the only sound of the skiff's engines. But the peace did not last. A shadow moved across the ground. Daniel looked up sharply. 3 small airbikes were approaching from the east. Their engines loud, riders hunched low, each one armed. "Raiders?" Daniel muttered. The pilot cursed under his breath, pushing the skiff faster. But the airbikes were built for speed. They closed in quickly. The riders shouting over the wind. "Hold on," Daniel told Lyra, moving toward the side rail. He pulled out his weapon and fired a warning shot. The first raider swerved, but did not fall back. Instead, they spread out, 2 coming up along the sides while the third moved toward the rear. The skiff shook as one raider fired a bolt into the hull. Lyra gripped the railing tightly, her heart pounding. Daniel aimed again, hitting the front wheel of one airbike, sending it spinning into the dirt, but the others kept coming. One raider jumped from his bike. Landing on the skiff's deck, Daniel met him head-on. The fight was quick, but rough. Daniel blocked a strike, shoved the attacker back, and sent him tumbling. Over the edge, the last raider circled closer. His weapon aimed not at Daniel, but at Lyra. Her breath caught. She clutched the silver device tighter in that moment. She understood why Daniel had been so careful. This was not just about keeping music alive. This was about survival. Daniel fired again, the shot striking the raider's weapon and sending sparks into the air. The man cursed and sped away, disappearing into the distance. The skiff slowed as the threat faded. The pilot let out a long breath. "You to make dangerous." "Enemies fast," he muttered. Daniel turned to Lyra, his voice calm but firm. "This is why we move quickly. No lingering, no showing the device unless necessary." Lyra nodded, her chest still tight. "I understand." They traveled for hours until the sun dipped below the horizon, the borderlands glowing under a pale moon. Daniel sat across from her, cleaning his weapon. She sat with the device in her lap. Feeling the weight of both the gift and the danger it brought, she thought of the raider's eyes. The way they looked at her not as a person, but as someone carrying something they wanted. But then she thought of the alien seller's face when she sang. The way the noise of the market had gone silent for a moment. The way her voice had power again. She decided then that no matter the risk, she would keep the music alive. Not just for herself, but for anyone who would listen. The skiff landed just before dawn, the pale light spilling across a small settlement built inside the shell of an ancient cargo hauler. Its massive metal walls rose like cliffs, rust streaking down their sides. Daniel stepped off first. Scanning the quiet streets, Lyra followed. The silver device wrapped tightly in her cloak, they had reached the inner border market. A place, Daniel said, was even more dangerous than the outlaw stalls they'd visited before. Here, the biggest trades happened in shadows, and the most powerful sellers didn't show their faces until they knew who they were dealing with. Daniel led her through a maze of narrow walkways, the air smelling of oil, metal, and cooking fires. Everywhere, eyes followed them, some curious, some cold. Lyra kept close to him, her fingers never loosening on the device. Finally, they reached a heavy door guarded by two tall aliens with scarred faces. Daniel spoke quietly to them, passing a small token into one of their hands after a tense pause. The guards stepped aside and let them through. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by hanging lamps. At the far end sat a broad, muscular alien with deep red skin, his eyes sharp and calculating. He leaned back in a reinforced chair, his hands resting on the arms as if he owned everything around him. "You're the human looking for Type 7 cells," the alien said, his voice low and heavy. Daniel nodded. "I am." The alien's gaze shifted to Lyra. "And you're the one with the voice." Lyra froze, her grip tightening on the cloak. "How do you know that?" The alien smiled faintly. "Word travels faster than ships in this place. Songbird, I hear you sang in the outer market, even moved the lizard merchant to part with his stock." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We need the cells, nothing more." The alien chuckled. "Oh, I have them," he said, "but payment will be special." Lyra glanced at Daniel, then back at the alien. "What kind of payment?" The alien leaned forward. "A performance. Here, now. For my guests, they arrive soon. They have never heard your kind of music, and I want to be the one who gives it to them." Daniel's voice was sharp. "That's too risky," but Lyra was already thinking. If one song could move a greedy seller to give them the cells before, maybe another could secure the last ones they needed. "If I do this," she said slowly, "you'll give us the cells immediately after." The alien grinned. Without hesitation, Daniel shot her a warning look, but she met his eyes. "We can't keep running forever," she said softly. "We need the cells." Reluctantly, he nodded. "Fine. But I stay beside her." The alien agreed, and his guards brought in a small table for the device. Lyra set it down, unwrapping it with careful hands, the silver gleam catching the low light. She pressed a button, and the first soft notes filled the room. The alien leaned back, clearly pleased. The door opened, and several guests entered, traders, smugglers, fighters, all dressed in rough, worn gear. They took seats around the room, their eyes on her. Lyra began to sing, her voice low at first, almost shy, but the moment she felt the melody wrap around her, she let it rise. Each note carried across the room like warm light through cold air. The sound shifted from gentle to powerful, weaving through the harp's recorded notes until the walls seemed to hum with it. The guests fell silent, their rough faces softening. Even the guards stood straighter. The red-skinned alien's smile widened, clearly enjoying the control this moment gave him when the final note faded. The room stayed still for a long moment before a few of the guests began to clap softly. The alien chuckled. "Beautiful, songbird. More beautiful than I imagined." He waved his hand, and one of his guards brought over a small black case, placing it on the table, 3 fresh Type 7 cells. As promised, Lyra exhaled in relief. Daniel stepped forward to take them. But in that same moment, the door to the room burst open. A group of armed raiders stormed in. Their leader, the same yellow-eyed alien who had watched Lyra in the city. His voice was a growl. "Told you to keep it close, songbird." The room erupted into chaos, the guests scattering. The red-skinned alien shouting orders. Daniel pulled his weapon, moving to shield Lyra. The yellow-eyed alien's men fanned out, blocking the exits, their eyes locked on the silver device. "This isn't about you," the leader said to the red-skinned alien. "Just hand over the girl and the box." The alien trader snarled, "In my hall. You dare." Blasters came up on both sides, the air thick with tension. Lyra's heart pounded. She knew they couldn't fight everyone. Not in this small room. Daniel's eyes flicked to her, then to the device. "Play," he mouthed. She hesitated. Only a moment before pressing a different button, a sharp, bright series of notes burst from the device. High and piercing, the sound bounced off the walls, making the raiders flinch and stumble back. Daniel seized the moment, firing at the nearest one. The red-skinned alien's guards joined in, the fight spilling across the room. Lyra clutched the device and the black case of cells, ducking behind the table as blaster fire lit the air. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back door. The red-skinned alien shouted after them, "You owe me another song, songbird." But there was no time to answer. They ran down a narrow hallway, boots pounding the metal floor, shouts and shots echoing behind them. Daniel kicked open a side exit, and they spilled out into the cold dawn air, the city waking up around them. Lyra's chest burned, but she kept running, the device and the cells held tight against her. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. The storm had begun. And she knew the worst was still coming. The streets of the border settlement twisted like a maze, narrow alleys splitting in every direction. Daniel led the way, his steps fast and sharp. Lyra ran behind him, clutching the silver device in one arm and the black case of energy cells in the other. The cold morning air burned her lungs, but she didn't slow. Shouts echoed from behind them. The raiders were still coming, their boots pounding against the metal walkways. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. "Keep moving," he said, his voice low but urgent. They cut through a row of empty market stalls, weaving between stacks of crates. But a group of raiders appeared from the other side, blocking their path. Lyra's chest tightened. She could see the yellow-eyed leader among them, his mouth twisted into a cruel grin. "Nowhere left to run, songbird," he said. Raising his weapon, Daniel stepped in front of her, his own weapon ready. "Stay behind me," he said. The first shot rang out, the air flashing with light. Daniel fired back, hitting one of the raiders in the leg. Chaos broke out. blaster fire tearing through the stalls. Crates splintering around them. Lyra ducked low, her hands tightening on. The device, a sharp cry made her look up. Daniel staggered. His shoulder hit by a bolt. He gritted his teeth but didn't fall. Blood darkened his shirt. The sight made Lyra's stomach twist. The raiders pressed forward, forcing them back against the wall. The yellow-eyed leader's voice was mocking. "Drop the box, and maybe I'll let him live." Lyra's pulse pounded in her ears. She knew if she handed it over, they would kill. Them, anyway. Her eyes darted to Daniel. His jaw clenched. His eyes met hers for just a moment. And she understood she had one chance. She pulled the device close. Pressing a different sequence of buttons, the sound that burst from it was not soft or gentle. It was powerful, sharp, and filled with layered harmonies that shook the air. It wasn't just music, it was a wall of sound. The raiders flinched, hands going to their ears, some stumbling back. The yellow-eyed leader growled in anger, but even he faltered, his aim wavering. Lyra's voice rose over the device, strong and fierce, her song cutting through the morning air like a blade. The melody wasn't the same as before. It wasn't a song of memory or peace. It was a song of defiance, of warning, of survival. It seemed to pulse through the ground itself, the air vibrating with every note. Daniel pushed himself forward. Using the distraction to fire again, 2 more raiders dropped their weapons. Stumbling back, the rest turned and fled, their leader snarling but retreating with them. The street fell silent except for the fading echo of Lyra's voice, her chest heaved with each breath, the device still humming faintly in her hands. Daniel lowered his weapon, his breathing heavy. "You saved us," he said, his voice rough. She knelt beside him quickly. Seeing the blood on his shoulder, "We need to get you somewhere safe," she said, her voice shaking slightly. They moved quickly through the side alleys. Daniel's steps slower. Now, his face pale, but determined. Lyra supported him with one arm while keeping the device and the energy cells close to her body. Every sound behind them made her heart race, but no one followed. At last, they reached the skiff dock. The same pilot from before, raising an eyebrow at their condition. "Looks like you stirred up trouble again," he muttered. But he didn't ask questions. He just helped them aboard and lifted the skiff into the sky. The settlement shrank below them, the morning sun spreading across the horizon. Daniel leaned back against the side rail, wincing but still managing a faint smile. "You were incredible back there," he said. Lyra shook her head. "I only did what I had to. You did more than that," he said, his gaze steady. "You turned music into a weapon." She looked down at the silver device in her lap, the new energy cells safe beside it. She thought of the way the raiders had scattered, the way her voice had cut through their anger. She realized then that Daniel was right. Music could be more than beauty. It could be strength. Hours later, they landed back near the city they had left days before. Daniel's wound was treated by a quiet medic who owed him a favor. Lyra sat beside him the whole time, the device resting on her knees. That evening, when the artificial lights dimmed and the streets grew quiet, she found herself back in the old abandoned music hall, the same place where she had first heard her lost song again. Daniel sat in the front row, his arm in a sling, watching her. She placed the device on the table, powered it with one of the new cells, and pressed a button. The room filled with the warm, clear notes of her crystal harp. She began to sing, not for trade, not for survival, but because she wanted to. Her voice carried through the empty hall, filling every shadow, every broken corner. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the sound wrap around him when the last note faded. She stood still for a long moment, her hands resting gently on the device. Then she looked at Daniel, a small smile touching her lips. "The war took my harp," she said softly, "but it didn't take my music. Daniel smiled back, and now it never will. Outside, the city went on with its noise and chaos. But in that hall, there was only music, strong, unbroken, and alive.